Should I begin? I think yes. Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I almost said good afternoon, but I'm running on India time at this moment, so it's already afternoon at my end. Welcome to this session on the geopolitics of water. I must thank the MSc for putting this on the main agenda for now the third year in a row, so I'm very excited to be moderating this discussion again. I have an excellent panel to talk about the geopolitics of water. We're going to go through a couple of different themes, and then I will open it up to discussion. I'm also glad to see so many people in the room for this discussion. Just to quickly go through our panel over here, we have Jessica Roswell, who's the Commissioner for Environment, Water Resilience and Competitive Circular Economy at the European Commission in Brussels. We have Dr. Aminata Touré, High Representative of the President, Republic of Senegal, and former Prime Minister of the Republic of Senegal. We have Minister Abdullah Balala, Assistant Minister for Energy and Sustainable Affairs, United Arab Emirates, and Minister Tanya Fayon, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, Republic of Slovenia. Did I pronounce your name right? Yes. Okay, great. And I'm Ambika Vishwanath. I'm the co-founder and director of Kuber9 Initiative, a think tank in India, and I'm also a principal research fellow at La Trobe University in Australia, so where I'm currently based. So my time zones are a bit all kind of skewed. So water and the geopolitics of water. Water is not, as we all know, just about who has it and who doesn't, right? It's not just about conflict, though that's the question that almost gets the headlines because that's the sexy topic. But it's also about cooperation, it's about health, it's about food security, it's about livelihoods, it's about empowerment, and it's about development, right? In COVID, for example, a time I don't think anyone has forgotten yet, we were all told to wash our hands for 20 seconds to save ourselves from catching the disease. 20 seconds of running water is 1.5 to 2 liters. And I've measured this on multiple different kinds of taps and at different speeds, right? Over 1 billion people don't have access to that kind of water to save themselves from any kind of disease. We're told from growing climate change, there is tension, more drought, more floods, more hot days, colder days. All of this is connected to water in some way or the other. Artificial intelligence. But the new buzzword, right? It went from resilience. I think resilience is still a big buzzword, but now AI is the big buzzword. All of that also needs water in different forms. For all of you, and I think a quick scan of this room, we're probably about 45 to 50 people. By the end of this session, you're all going to be on your phone asking at least one question on the phone. Who am I? Who is maybe somebody on this panel? By the end of that, this session would have probably used around 70 to 80 liters of water. Just this one session, this one room, 45 to 50 of us over here. Might seem like a small amount, but when you calculate that for all the people in this conference and then the wider community and all the tech users in the world, that's a lot of water that gets used per day, right? So let's discuss all of these issues. I'm going to go through a couple of rounds of questions with our panel and then open it up to questions with the audience, right? So, Dr. Touré, if I may start with you. Senegal just hosted an excellent opening event and planning meeting for the upcoming UN Water Conference, which is to be hosted later in the year in the UAE. For some of you who might not know, the UN Water Conference is not something that happens every year, though I think it should. This is the second year after the last one was 3 years ago in the US, and the one before that was 47 years before that, right? So big time gaps that we're hopefully closing. One of the main themes that came out of that conference and that's going into the planning is about the need for water for cooperation, right? And the Senegal River Basin, I would say, in my opinion, and all the research that I've done, is a very unique instance of water cooperation in how it's managed by the 4 countries that share the Senegal River. So from your perspective, sitting in that part of the world. What do you think are the implications of intensifying competition on resources, either between countries or also within a country in some cases? And what does that implication then have for the larger security concern? And why is this important then when we're talking about it in a sense of water for cooperation at a conference setting?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the fact that water was even added to the agenda of this year's conference on security here in Munich. That's a good step forward, but it has to be escalated all the way to the plenary because it can be a risk factor for security. In Senegal, we do have what we call in French Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Sénégal, which is an organization for the Senegal River management between the countries of Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, and Senegal, all the way, back from the beginning of independence. I must salute the wisdom of what we call our founding president, because we rely heavily, all four of us, the four countries, on the water from the Senegal River. So it is one of the good case studies to be shared. Despite the ups and downs in our mutual relationship, that agreement was never questioned, and I can say that it really contributed to stabilizing the relationship between four countries. And the principle is the river doesn't belong to any particular state; it belongs to the four states. And our mutual population goes by that. So that requires, of course, investing in joint infrastructure, a joint management team with very specific, rotating positions, and it has worked over these past 60 years. I think that's an example to be shared. We do believe that, the whole thing about making sure that member states around rivers or whatever, water or sea, the more they collaborate, the more I do believe, it impacts positively on stability within neighbors. We do have a saying that goes, if you want prosperity at home, that's what I was telling you, make sure that also your neighbor, is prospering. Otherwise, of course, you're going to look over over the fence or over the border. So I think it's a very good example. So sharing resources doesn't have to be about force, about who is the strongest. I think now we can give lesson to some of the trend we are seeing nowadays. You come to MVS, to Senegal, Mali, Guinea, and Mauritania to see how we're managing. We are, although we are in a resource-constrained environment, that agreement, that peaceful agreement, sustain really the peaceful and stable cooperation between most of our countries. And we do invest mutually into building dams in a very equal way. So that's something I would like to really. I think it was really wisdom at a very early stage of our state building, which is not necessarily the case in other parts of the world, in other parts of Africa. And I would like to drive the attention here about the Nile River management that might lead to a crisis. And maybe we would like to take prevention measures and start mediating. We do know that between Egypt and Ethiopia, it's not always easy to manage the Nile. But I think OMVS could be a very good example across the world that we don't have to go to war against each other. We just have to be reasonable and peaceful, and then
and pragmatic, if I may add as well. I agree. I've traveled around that river and seen the dam that was jointly built by the OMBS and the countries, and it is an excellent example. But the reality is that the Senegal River Basin is not what is the way we manage water resources around the world, especially not in South Asia, where I come from. Plenty of tension over there, and I think that might be putting it mildly a little bit on the water resources. In the last 3 years alone, we've seen almost 400 incidences, various kinds of incidences on water, whether it's within countries or between countries. And that's a 150% increase from the 3 years before that, right? So it's the year-on-year increase right now is quite drastic. So, Minister Fayon, if I may come to you, I mean, Slovenia has been a champion of cooperation, of better water management. You've got some excellent systems, and you're engaged with a lot of different countries on learning from your systems. Why is this important for a country like Slovenia? Why do you think that bringing your ideas elsewhere would be useful? And how do you see that as a step towards mitigating conflict that could be small scale or within countries in wherever in the world that you're working in?
Yes, maybe allow me to start with telling you that Slovenia is, in a way, unique. Maybe one of the rare countries on the globe that we have the right to drinkable water written into our constitution. So what I want to say is that the water and all the related issues is really in the heart of our citizens. And we are for years very vocal on the water diplomacy, also in the last 2 years when we were acting in a Security Council, and currently we are presiding the UN Water Convention. Gladly to see that 10 new countries joined, 20 new are announcing to join, some new agreements on cooperation to be signed. We have a good experience after the bloody wars in the former Yugoslavia. This was that we established one of the first initiatives for peace was Sava River Basin Commission that managed that all the countries after the war and the conflict started to building peace and cooperating in a transboundary water system. And that, of course, gave a platform for other initiatives to build peace in the region. So certainly transboundary cooperation is extremely important to prevent conflicts. We also, during our Security Council in the last 2 years, created a global alliance how to save water resources in armed conflicts. We see in today's geopolitics that we have a numerous number of conflicts on European continent, around Europe, and always there is a reason that the water can cause a conflict. So we try to work hard to build on transboundary cooperation, to protect water resources, and I'm certain that we are very much aware, as you said, that we have to build alliances on that. So this is what we are trying, and I think the UN Water Convention, you said, should take place every year. I certainly agree that this is the source of life. We need to protect it, and we need to understand it. As a former Prime Minister from Senegal said, I mean, if you're a country upstream on the river, if you do not, when you build infrastructure or, dams, if you do not cooperate with the countries on the downstream, and you cause, injustice or not equal opportunities to reach the water resources, that is a source of a conflict. And so we have a lot of work to do.
If I can push you a little bit on that, I mean, for many parts of the world, this sounds nice, but in Europe, where you already have many systems in place, getting to cooperation on some other areas is often easier, right? And Commissioner Rospel, I'm going to come to you on this as well. How do you then bring the concepts of what you're doing here in Europe within that space of, the Water Framework Directive and other areas of cooperation to regions that might not already have robust systems of dialogue? what is that one key thing that we can take?
I mean, for me, the key thing is being a politician that we really try to create an environment, through the dialogue, also through finding solutions in our political systems, but transboundary, how to protect water resources and how to cooperate, and how to make sure that everyone can have equal access to water, not to create additional injustice. And of course, in current situation where we have a lot of challenges in a geopolitical world, it's a huge responsibility on all of us. I think the Commissioner will better explain how in Europe we are tackling with the legislation. But first and important is that we are aware that the water can be the source of a conflict and that we have to prevent it. And especially with these global alliances that we created, it's also raising awareness that the water is not touchable.
Right.
Conflict.
Yes, I think that's a key point, right? Water can be a source of conflict, but often it gets embroiled in other kinds of conflict, and that's when things start to go more downhill. So, Commissioner, if you'd like to add on to anything on that question, and then I have another question for you as well.
But it's correct that the EU has a lot of regulation when it comes to water, a bunch of them, and we have a framework. But it's also true that we also, of course, have had our fair share, not maybe a fair share, but we also have had conflicts about rivers and water management, because for example, Donau is a really long river with a lot of countries around. Not always. At the moment, we have a good cooperation, and of course, I think that we can learn from each other. But I'm afraid to say that we know that it also can create conflicts. So that's one thing. I mean, I'm coming from Sweden. If I go to the Baltic Sea, finally we are cooperating. And I should say we should have done that before, much earlier, because the Baltic Sea is more or less dead. Maybe not driving for conflicts, but we also need to cherish the water per se, because that is a problem also. So regulation and good cooperation is of course good, but we also need to talk about it, and that's, I think, also agree that we need to have it high on the agenda all the time.
Yes, and high on the agenda of conferences such as this, right? For all the MSc folk that are listening to us. But if I can add on to that, and I mean, regulation is good to a certain degree, but it can be restrictive in some cases. And for Europe, that's facing different kinds of climate patterns and changing weather patterns and hazards. You're seeing the kind of floods that we saw in southern Europe in the last couple of years. A lot of that is changing, or we need to have a look at how that might change, what kind of cooperation we need in the future. So what is the thinking then at your end, where you have already so much regulation, you have so many systems in place on your water resources, but when those resources themselves are facing so much change, how do you move forward?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we have taken water for granted. I'm the first commissioner with water. Of course, as I said, we have not a regulation, but it's been a little bit spread out, so nobody really is responsible. I think that we are finally taking our responsibility. But of course, due to climate change, the scarcity also hits Europe. Different scarcity, of course, compared to other places in the world, but still, this is a real challenge for us. So that is one thing we need to, what I would say, enforce the legislation. It's one thing to have a good framework, but then you also need to enforce it, and that all the member states, I'm working with them. So that is one thing. But I mean, again, it's not only scarcity, also the quality of water that we need to. That again, we have regulations. We exactly also have techniques, but that doesn't come up to scale. So it's a very broad perspective of tools that I need to work with. So the bad thing is that we know how difficult it is. We know the scarcity, we know the quality, but the good thing is that we know what to do and we need to enforce that. And that is also come to the global perspective, because of course water is nothing. It's really a global issue. I mean, the water cycle is we share the same water. So I think that's why I think this conference also, and thank you Senegal and UAE for holding this. So that will be one important thing. And just on the urgency to put water high on the agenda, it drives conflicts. Yes, it can also bring us together, but it's also a strategic infrastructure that we've seen in Ukraine, for example, how you can hit dams, that it can actually have a devastating impact on the population. But also the scarcity has you took the AI example and the data centers, but I mean, water is so essential for all the production that we have. So it's like really finally on the agenda. So broad so I'm very happy that I have the possibility to work with it.
And there's a business case to be made, right, for water cooperation. It's not just, I mean, we'd like to think it's just a moral imperative and that everybody should have access to water, and it's a human right, though that came onto our charter too late, I would say, in some cases. But there's a business case to be made. And so, Minister Malala, if I can come to you on that. I mean, the UAE has some of the highest water footprints globally in terms of consumption, but it's also got a plan for reducing that consumption. Your government has talked a lot about moving just beyond dialogue, and that was a statement that came out to actually scaling financing for these aspects, right? So how do you see a country like the UAE that on the one hand has such high consumption patterns, but on the other hand is also a very dry and scarce nation? What are the learnings over here, and how do we take that then to other countries that might be in a similar situation?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question. And again, I echo Her Excellency, the former Prime Minister of Senegal, of bringing water as a subject into the MSC. We want to see more of these initiatives. So speaking about the UAE, allow me to say at the beginning that we truly understand the value of water in that part of the world. We're a country that don't have rivers, not exposed to enough rain, and we really understand how important is this precious, sacred resource. Hence, we have took multiple initiatives forward. The last one is hosting the United Nations Water Conference at the end of the year in Abu Dhabi with our colleagues and friends in Senegal. So to your question, yes, we are a desalination nation. We realize that we have a high water consumption, but the solution that we're doubling down on is technologies. Today, the UAE, I think it's an undeniable fact that we are a powerhouse investors. We do apply the latest technologies, including artificial intelligence, into things like leakage detection, identifying aquifers and underground water, and finding ways into how we can refill them. Apart from that, there is, of course, another track that is concerned with education and public social campaign, if you want, in terms of reducing water consumption. And that's pretty much important. We need to make sure that this precious resource is part of our curriculums. There is cost associated with that. And to your financing word, I think it's a global issue today. And one of my findings, delving deep into the water sector globally, not only in the UAE, is it's under-prioritized, underfunded, and above all taken for granted by so many nations around the world. And that's a major problem. And today, and since we are at MSC, I don't want to mention specific conflicts. I think we're all aware of them. There are lots of issues associated with community displacement, conflicts between member states, and of course affecting the economies and growth directly. You just asked Jessica about the question of how there is a business case behind this and how this can have an impact directly to economies. We're talking about major sectors here. We're talking about food security, which in case of a water shortage or scarcity, there will be a big issue there. With that comes rises of prices within the same area or state, if you want. And the vulnerability associated with that opens up for other players, be it domestically or externally, that can take it as a tool of leverage and play with it in a negative way.
So I want to pick up on this, right? The vulnerabilities that we are seeing emerging, and I'm going to come back to you, Minister Fayon, about that. As a European nation, what would you say is an important component for your country, but also your partners in your neighborhood, to ensure that water becomes then part of geopolitical strategic conversation, and it's not just a discussion between water experts and maybe the climate experts?
I mean, first, luckily we live in the part of the globe that we have clean water, we have water resources. We do face some extreme weather conditions, but not at the extent we see the other parts of the world. But maybe I could relate to what the former Prime Minister from Senegal said with your quotation. I think it's always not investing, but really somehow supporting the neighboring countries also in well-being, brings you peace and stability back at home. And that relates also to cooperation on water management. That I come back to geopolitics and the conflicts. I mean, if you do not establish cooperation on water, transboundary cooperation, in many ways, with the agreements also how to settle the disputes. What was our experience, I mentioned before, on this Sava River Basin Commission, we also established a mechanism how to settle disputes. Luckily was never so far used. But I think there are a lot of ways that we have, and we are in need to protect the water resources. I give you an example. I mean, today, looking to the conflicts from Gaza, Ukraine, to Yemen, Sudan, I mean, it can be incidentally, it can be intentionally destroyed, but it can be also weaponized in a way that there are non-state actors that take the water resources in their hands and offer that to the population, and they legitimize themselves with that. So we have a lot of, a lot of challenges, how to deal with it, and I think for that is good to raise awareness, to cooperate on a global level through UN, Water Convention, or through global alliances, that in geopolitics, and I'm very grateful that you have this conference, because I think in times of either extreme water or extreme weather condition or scarcity, as you said, and in geopolitics of conflicts, that we have to really work together on how to protect our water resources.
Thank you. I'm happy to take some questions from our audience. So while you're thinking and putting your hands up, and I'm sorry, that part of the room that there's like a glare, so if you're putting your hand up, please wave. But before we come back to the audience, a question to Senegal and to UAE, because you're co-hosting this conference this year, right? One quick sentence from both of you or either of you on what are you doing to ensure that the UN Water Conference this year is not another discussion only between people who have bought into the idea for the need for water cooperation, but opening it up to include other folks who actually need to also learn, understand, and be part of this discussion?
Well, I do think that, like all UN conferences, you are very hopeful. But we're going to be even more hopeful, because water is about public good. I think we have to also very clearly say that, because it's not obvious for everyone, because it becomes merchandised and then unaffordable, and it leads all the way to, at least impairing the rights to access to clean water. So I think in this whole debate, we should not forget that. Second, we should not forget, at least in Africa, but when you talk about water, you have a woman face. You would not see anywhere a man with a bucket of water on his head, ever. So in the whole discussion, making sure also that women are part of the processes all the way up is very, very important. But for the UN, what we are looking, the UN meeting, and we're happy to really co-organize it with the Emirate, is to renew commitment, because it's very important, political commitment. We underestimate that. Commitment, that's where things start. And then what we're looking forward to, because we have to be very ambitious, is to one day have a UN Convention on Water that would be domesticated within national laws. I think that's the ambition we should reach if we are very serious about making sure that it's a public good, as we do with health and as we do with education. So I think that's my hope for that. Of course, after that, there will be ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
But let's be very optimistic and reach out to a UN convention that will all tied up as a community of human, and this is a basic resource that we have to share across the world.
Minister, you want to add anything there, or shall I?
In short, before we hand it to the audience to ask us, we've done so many things differently in this UN Water Conference. Of course, allow me at the beginning to thank Tajikistan and the Netherlands for bringing it actually back after 47 years. That by itself is a big success. And then the UAE and Senegal put themselves forward to host it this year in Abu Dhabi. What we have done differently is appointing co-chairs almost 1 year before the conference itself is also a big advantage for us. In a time when multilateralism is being tested, and I think we all in this room realize what's going on, we got a consensus in July 9th on the interactive dialogue themes. And this consensus is a testament of how inclusive the consultations were. So it took us more than a year to knock all doors. You're talking about member states, NGOs, civil society, academic institutions, you name it, indigenous people. Everyone were part of the process. And this successful, inclusive consultations led into the consensus we got in July 9th last year. So these are things that we've done differently. And we are optimistic. When the world came and united on adopting in consensus the thematics, hopefully this spirit continues and to really achieve our objectives and goals, which is focusing and evolving around the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal number 6.
Thank you. I also will add that the pre-meetings that happened in Senegal government really made it easy for people from all over the world to be able to come and attend. And there's a lot of discussion within the UAE to ensure that visas do not restrict attendance, right? Which I think is really important, because the last conference that happened in New York was a little bit restrictive for some people. You had your hand up first, right? I'll take a couple of questions.
Thank you. Anna Rosenberg, I really have a question to get a little bit of a better overview of the issue in your respective regions. So where would you say are the most acute water scarcity crises spilling into politics and geopolitics, if it's in the Middle East, in Europe, and in Africa?
Thank you. And we'll take one more.
Thank you. Good morning. Several decades ago, there was a very simplistic, charming belief that desalination of seawater, the oceans, could solve all of our problems. And so I wonder what are the reasons the panel think that it's not a bigger factor, apart from maybe just construction cost and energy use. Why aren't there more desalination plants around the world? Thank you.
Thank you. And also thank you for keeping your question short. We'll take one more over there. Yes.
Faik from Azerbaijan. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists. Azerbaijan, as a being downstream country, depending on upstream water flow around 70%, we see the difficulty to open discussions even with the upstream countries, and they don't join to the UN Water Convention, and very, very difficult to go for the bilateral agreements. And there are several UN bodies with diverse mandate, including the water. What do you think, my question to all of our panelists, maybe we need some specific UN body solely related to the water with the strong mandate to push this agenda forward, as and UN recognize the access to water as a human right.
Okay, thank you. So three very different questions, so that's great. I will start with you, Commissioner, and feel free to answer whatever you think is most relevant to you.
Well, they're all relevant, of course, but if I start with where I see this biggest problem or challenges when it comes to Europe, when it comes to scarcity, because as I said, it's also quality, where all Europe is facing challenges, different challenges. I refer to the Baltic Sea, but we have PFAS all over, and it's the nexus to health, I think, is underestimated as a whole in Europe. But when it comes to scarcity, of course, due to climate change, the Mediterranean area is at high risk. I was in Cyprus last week, and that links me to the desalination question maybe. So of course they have a reed scarcity. But with that said, as I already said, I'm from Sweden. North of Europe has, of course, water, but we also have scarcity. So my point here is that we all need to think about how we use the water more efficiently. And here we also need to cooperate on learning from each other on that. But the question is, of course, spilling over to other sectors, food protection, and I agree that everybody has a human right, but I would also say that not all projects are bankable today. That is also something that I know we are going to discuss in the conference. I think this is a crucial question. I get quite frustrated that other areas are more bankable, because this water issue is not an issue. Is something that we all need. And desalination. I mean, there is. I don't say that it's. We need it in some places. We don't have any alternatives, but I also would argue that we also see that it's not only climate friendly using fossil fuel, for example, so we need also to be very mindful on how we can use the water more efficiently in a more climate smart ways in places that we actually have that possibility, and that means investing in water. That's, I think, just finally, and then on the upstream, and maybe that's linked also to the first question. I mean, we see, and Slovenia knows this very well, we see also in Europe more often droughts and severe flooding. And here again, the bankable question is again, it is not really who is going to pay for the prevention of floodings. We know they're coming more often. They're costing both lives and money, and that is something that we need to cooperate also within Europe and making it bankable to actually do the investment upstream in nature-based solutions and so forth. So again, I think we a little bit know what to do. We don't have all the solutions yet, though.
Okay, Dr. Toure?
Well, I do believe that we need to have, in the point about scarcity, well, the Sahel is a very dry zone, but yet we were able to have an agreement to manage the scarcity. So it's, it's not one or the other. It's a very dry zone, and the desert is advancing at rapid rates, but yet we managed to have a common framework. And that's where maybe also during the UN Conference on Water in Abu Dhabi, we should also, draw our attention. How can we build up viable framework for water management? I think it's very important. In that framework, prevention should be part of it. Sharing knowledge should be part of it. In many parts of the Sahel, you do have underground water, but you will rely on other people's technology to make it accessible. And of course, the whole issue about making sure that it's a public good, I insist on it, because we are witnessing, including in Senegal, sort of the increase of the price of water with the impact on most vulnerable population in many parts of the zone. So that piece also is, so that it comes to the bankable part of it, but if it is a public good, is it about profit or is it about availability as a right? I'm sure we have to balance that, because you need to bring up technology and infrastructure that costs money. But that's the tricky piece. Let's not lose sight that many people will survive because they would have access to water, and that water is becoming more and more expensive. So that is also part of the equation we have to solve. But definitely having a global framework, regional frameworks, neighbor-to-neighbor framework with the content of what we want to do, put inside, will be part of the conversation in Abu Dhabi.
So making an economic case for all of this, along with making an economic case for energy, for example, right? These are not one or the other. Minister, you?
I want to highlight what our colleague from Azerbaijan, and we're honored to have His Excellency Mukhtar with us here, the COP29 president in Azerbaijan. I think it's an undeniable fact that having 36 UN entities to have an indirect saying in a way or another into water makes the job difficult. So I hope they take advantage of the reformation happening now at the UN 80, if I'm not mistaken, and really come up with a structure where water is basically positioned and brought back to where it belongs. The second thing I want to highlight is with regards to desalination. Today, we are a desalination nation at the UAE, but of course there are things needs to be considered. Energy consumption, as you mentioned, not disrupting the ecosystem of the Gulf or wherever you are desalinating from. We see and we realize these issues. In 2024, we launched a global X Prize challenge with $150 million for the winner, and we opened up for the whole world. It's called Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative. And through the initiative, or this initiative at its heart aims to come up with a desalination system, a full-fledged desalination system that is scalable, affordable, and sustainable. And this is how we should bet on technology in solving such problems when it's come to water.
Can I just quickly, in one more minute, if you can say, I mean, it sounds great, but not everybody has that kind of cash flow. And how do we ensure that that technology comes to the last mile, to the communities that are the most affected, the women that are most affected, and you know, the smaller countries that cannot embark on these paths? What can we do there?
I think from our perspective as UAE, I think it's an undeniable fact that our aid program is among the biggest globally. So we have a full-fledged dedicated water pillar under our aid strategy. That's one thing. The second thing, this technology won't be only for the UAE. It will be deployed elsewhere, wherever it's needed. So that's number one. Number two, the scalability of utilizing this technology elsewhere is also a testament that water is a good, profitable business case. Because simply the off-takers are secured. If there is no water, there is no life. So another way of looking at this, Ambika, is to come up with really a quite wide range of de-risking mechanisms, especially when we're talking to multilateral development banks, international financial institutions, really needs to pick this up because the numbers are shocking. We're talking about billions of people who don't have access into water today. So utilizing this demand as a or maybe utilizing the existing capital in MDBs and IFIs to respond into this huge financial gap, which is quantified by the World Bank, if I'm not mistaken, by $6.7 trillion. That's a huge amount of money we're talking about. And deploy these updated or inventions and solutions, such as the technologies we're working on, we really can move a needle in that way.
Okay.
I will try with your question on how dangerous is or how the climate change maybe affects Europe or other continents. I can tell you that in our country, Slovenia, in the last few years, we did experience extreme weather conditions. You mentioned from drought, when we had severe forest fires. A few years ago, a year later, we had severe floods. So we see and we learned maybe two lessons. One thing is that we are not well prepared on extreme weather conditions. And second, how important for us solidarity was. But looking other parts of the globe, I would say just the continent of Africa. I mean, when you still tackle the extreme weather condition, poverty, scarcity, and no technology and, you know, proper development and sharing know-how. So I think we never managed to really tackle today climate migration. I mean, all that is today in globalized world effects of water scarcity and not sharing experience or supporting each other also when it comes to development, but this is also an effect of the climate change. So maybe to your question, I would see that today in a globalized world, we really have to be aware what is happening on the other side of the globe, because sooner or later that is affecting us. And it's a lot of inequalities when we look to climate change and also water scarcity inequalities around. So, yeah, this is another topic, not so much in a geopolitics, but strongly related.
Well, migration does sometimes get embroiled in the geopolitical discussion, and migration from climate change, migration from water conflicts, food insecurity, all of these things are connected. So thank you for bringing that up. We are at time, so lest I get booted out by the MSC folks, I will say thank you. I'm sorry, but they will otherwise never invite me back again. But do you want to? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Yes.
Well, I'd like to introduce myself as Danilo Turk, Club de Madrid, one of the former presidents. And the introductory sentence I want to make is this. Let us not follow the European model, because European model is about water cooperation after armed conflicts. That was, ever since the Peace of Westphalia to the peace in former Yugoslavia. Water cooperation arrangements were made after the conflicts. Now, how to make sure that water cooperation arrangements prevent conflict? We go to the West African model, to the Senegal River, which is really a fantastic model, and underreported, not sufficiently known, and not sufficiently used as a source of inspiration. So that's my first point. And then there is a question. I think that now, at least those of us who are here, we understand that the needs for investment in water management, water infrastructure, and everything else are growing and are really serious. And then, of course, excuse me, we have international banks which are busy with that. I mean, the World Bank is there. The European Investment Bank is very active. We have heard from Nadia Calvino, whom we met yesterday, and so forth. So there is a lot of concern in the financial world. My specific question is this. Do we need an international water bank, a bank which would be specializing on water projects, adding additional resources and visibility to the priority of water? Is that feasible? Is that possible? Is that desirable? I don't know if any of the panelists...
I think that's a great question, and perhaps that's a topic we can discuss the next time we're all here in Munich, about the need and how do we get a water bank going. I'm sure any of the panelists might want to answer that question outside of this session, so I will invite all of you just to join me and say thank you to the panel for this discussion. And thank you all for being here. There's going to be another session in about 11 minutes in the same room.
And all of you are invited for the UN Water Conference.